We throw a lot of weird terms around in game dev. Things like a vertical slice, 3Cs, or dirty builds. Those things mean a lot to us. But if you're not in the trenches, you might have no idea of what they mean. So in this video, I'm breaking down some of the most common and the most confusing jargon that we use in game development, especially in AAA. So if this sounds like something you would enjoy, come and join me. Let's go. Hello and welcome to another video. Now, before we get started, I want to actually tell you guys that last week I released my brand new course that is all about making a showreel that game developers love. And this is based on my 20 plus years experience of looking at showreels, hundreds of showreels, and there's some traits that they all have, the ones that make it. And I'm going to share those with you. Plus, I'm going to tell you what studios are looking for when it comes to hiring somebody, because it's not only about talent or skills. There's much more to it. And I'll also open the door about what goes on behind the scenes at the studio when they're looking at your showreel and much more. So if this sounds like something you're interested in, definitely click the link down below and check it out. Now, back to the video. Alright, so let's start with a vertical slice. What is a vertical slice? This is a big word that we all use in game development, and you might have heard of it at this point, because I feel like gamers nowadays know much more about what goes on in game development and what goes on behind the scenes than people used to about 10-15 years ago, which was all a mystery. But a vertical slice is very much like a piece, just like the name describes, a piece of the game that you can show publishers, investors, or anybody that you're trying to pitch your game to. So in a way, it's a mini version of the full game. Now, a quick disclaimer here, because once again, every single topic of these can make a full video, is that 9 times out of 10, vertical slices are actually thrown in the bin, and then if you get money from publishers and investment, you normally have to start the game fresh. And this is going to be a conversation that is definitely going to be too long for this video, but vertical slices a lot of the time demonstrate what the game can be, the potential, but it's not the actual game. Alright, so Blockout or Whitebox, both things mean the same thing, a Blockout and a Whitebox. So before we build beautiful levels, we need to actually have something that basically is a blockout of the level, for example. And this can be used in a bunch of different things, because any work in progress or whips, right, which everybody should be aware of, is basically a blockout. So this can be for art, this can be for levels, and even for animations as well, you can say it. Animations is a bit more complex because it's difficult to state something as a blockout, but blockout or whitebox is very much the very first version of something that you do. And then you work on that blockout and whitebox version of the level until it's approved, until it feels good in the game for you to kind of traverse the level or work on a specific item. And then once it's approved by the game director, your art director, whoever it is, you then polish it and make it beautiful. So this can go for trees or cars or anything that you actually have in the game. There's first a blockout or white box, and then there's the beauty version of it where all the details come online. Pre-production, production, and post-production. What is it? A lot of production words, right? So what this means is the different states that a game development is actually done. So pre-production is this magical place that all developers love, where you actually are throwing a lot of ideas for your game against the wall to see if it sticks. So you're basically brainstorming, you're trying different things, you're finding out exactly what the design of the game is, you're trying to find animation styles, you're trying to find art styles, you're doing a lot of concept art. All of this happens in pre-production. Production is where the meat and potatoes get done, where all the game gets done, this is where studios close doors. And then at that point, you don't see the game for 2 or 3 years and you don't hear about the game for a while. That means that they are in production. They are working in the game is being made, all that stuff. Post-production is what happens when you have a live service or when you have a 0-day patch or a day 1 patch. Things that happen after the game has been released to the public, and now you have to work on the game. Before, when I first started with no live services, It was very much about maybe patching the game if you actually had to download a patch here and there. Now it's all about what's the live service program or idea for the next year or two. What are we going to do? That is post-production. That takes us to Gold Master. So Gold Master is very much that after you finish all of it, now production is done. And what that means is that you have to produce a version of the game that is final. And in all honesty, games, at least back in the day, they used to be final, but nowadays they never feel like they're final. But that's basically what the Gold Master means, is the version, the best version of the game that people are going to play day one. And I'm going to talk more about how we used to see it back in the day, because it needs to be the version that doesn't have any bugs, the version that is basically super polished, the version that doesn't crash, the version that has everything, that is stable. A stable build is another way of calling it. And that version of the Gold Master basically signifies what the game is going to be. And it's called Gold Master because this used to be the version that gets printed into physical discs, that goes into boxes so you can put it on your PlayStation on day one. That's why it's called Gold Master. Nowadays, it's very much that you get a final version of a game that goes into what we're going to talk about next, which is certification, which then means that is the version that players get day one whenever they buy it, right? But knowing how games are, and you guys know this, you normally get a patch afterwards. And the reason why you get the patch is because after the Gold Master, development is still going. And then after, when the game finally releases, let's say 3 months from now, after the Gold Master, we have now improved a bunch of stuff, which means that when you put that disc, which is the Gold Master, you now get an update day one, right? Or day zero patch, day one patch, depending on what it is. That's Gold Master. All right, so this takes us into TCRs. TCR stands for Technical Certification Requirements, and for short is very much like certification. This is what we call it. And all consoles, Nintendo, PlayStation, and also Xbox, they all have this massive book, or at least it used to be a book, a physical book back in the day, that you need to follow the guidelines in order to make it to the platform. So this is why certification. So all developers that are developing for a platform have normally these guidelines next to them or in the computer, because it's no longer physical, that they need to follow through to make sure that they hit every single metric. Because if you don't, what happens is that once you actually finish, have the Gold Master that we're just talking about, you submit it to a PlayStation, to an Xbox, or to a Nintendo, and they will have testers that basically go through the game, play the game a bunch for a week, 2 weeks, and make sure that the game is following all the guidelines. If the game fails any of the guidelines, it means that it goes back to the developer. Now, what I haven't said here is how much it costs, because to submit a game for certification, it costs crazy money. And, you know, I think the prices must have changed from back in the day, but it used to be hundreds of thousands of dollars in order to basically submit your game, which basically meant that when a developer submits their game, they better make sure that the game is 100% solid when it comes to playability. And this is why one of the crux of the problems that we now feel like all games have bugs, and back in the day games didn't have many bugs, is because one of the biggest scares they had was passing certification. So they actually made sure that the game was absolutely squeaky clean so they could pass certification for the first time. And it was one of those moments of crossing the fingers and hoping for the best. And if you did pass certification, it was a massive hurrah moment. But if you failed certification, especially if it was a second or third time, it felt like a dragon that you had to slay. It felt like a massive endeavor. LODs, or level of detail. This is something super crucial, and it's something that we talk about all the time in games, because LODs, people probably know of LODs as in like, you know, polygons appearing on the screen. Maybe you know about it, but the idea of LODs is very much that when you are far away from an object, let's say this is the player and this is the object, when it's far away, you can cull or cut the amount of detail that the object have in order for it to consume less memory, right? And the closer we get, there's another level of LOD that is a little bit better, because now the player can see the object much better. And then let's say it's really close. Now we actually can see the object incredibly well because you're really close. So that's those are levels of LODs, level of detail. And normally for AAA games that are single player, normally have about 5 of them. For multiplayer games, normally have also quite a few. If it's a low budget game, normally they have about 3 of them, and that's it. But you need to create those models, for example, for characters with different levels of detail, and then the engine will just like basically choose them. And back in the day, if you guys remember, you have these images, like sometimes the trees will pop into like detail and then pop out of detail and look like fuzzy. Those are level of details, but now engines and consoles got so much better that you barely notice it half of the time. So root motion versus in place. Now, in every game, what you see is normally a character running around, right? Like, you know, and if you shoot a character, you're shooting the geometry. But the reality is different. What the game sees, what the engine sees, is not really the character when you shoot it, or when you actually kind of like, you know, hit a certain obstacle or whatever. It's actually a capsule, an invisible capsule that actually goes around the player. And this is how, especially for multiplayer games, this is how the game knows where the character is. So if I'm jumping or running or whatever, what the game is tracking is very much what the capsule is doing, at what speed the capsule is doing. What happens inside the capsule, the animations, really doesn't matter for the engine. This is mostly for visual, for the player, right? To indicate to the player what the character is doing. So there's always a question in development, normally early on, normally during pre-production, which comes to, are we going to do root motion or are we going to do in-place characters? And root motion basically means that you actually have the motion of the player, which is normally like a little controller just under the pelvis of the player, that dictates the animation that we do when we move the character 2 meters, we move the character 1 meter. That dictates the distance that the player moves, and animation is dictating the metrics. And go and check out my video about metrics that I did a while back, but the animation dictates the metrics for the animation. In place means that designers or coders can move that capsule as they want to, and basically they dictate the spacing and the metrics of the animation. Now there's pros and cons on each, but that's basically the meaning of root motion versus in-place animation. A dirty build. Now this is basically a build that contains hacks, that contains test code, contains like uncommitted files. It basically is a build that you just do to test the game for a specific time. Now, doing pre-production, there's a lot of dirty builds because you're just trying things. During production, you normally start with a lot of dirty builds, and then halfway through you start getting like stable builds. That's the difference. Dirty builds, stable builds. And then stable builds means that most of the game is stable, there's not a lot of crashes, and the more you develop the game, the more stable the game gets until you get to that gold master. 3 C's. Now, I've actually made a video about this one actually. Go and check it out if you haven't seen it, but 3 C's means character, camera, and movement. And these 3 things in the game, if you think about it, these 3 things actually are always kind of like playing off each other. So because we see it all together as one, normally one department is taking care of it or has an overseeing role on the 3 C's, either design or animation or both. And this is basically like, you know, if you actually are animating a character punching another one and there needs to be some type of effect on the camera, somebody has to animate the camera, or we need to make it procedural. And the same thing with the control, how fast is the punch to the character, and then also what happens with the enemy that gets punched. Those 3 things need to work in tandem. Normally in the best games, whenever you hit something or you throw something or something dynamic happens, it feels amazing when you play it, right? Especially as with the games as of late. Spider-Man, for example, comes to mind. Those 3 things are working together in tandem to give you that feeling of either speed or force or anything that basically the game's developers want, and that is basically the 3 C's. A strike team, what is it? So a strike team is put together to solve a specific issue during development. So to go back to the basics, during development there's going to be the animation team, the art team, the design team, the code team, like the audio team. They all have different teams and they're going to be formed by, let's say, 10 people each, right? Now, while you develop the game and you are in full production, there's going to be problems that pop up as you develop the game that is going to be problematic. And those problems sometimes require more than one discipline to fix the problem, especially if it's a problem that is persistent. So strike teams come together from audio, design, art, animation, whatever, to fix this problem. Normally they take one person of each or several people of each and then put them together in a strike team. And this strike team normally stays together for as long as we can solve the specific issue. Sometimes it's days, sometimes it's weeks, sometimes it's months, but the whole goal is to solve an issue. Sometimes the issue is there there because, you know, we actually made it into a bug or is a problem with the game, or sometimes it's a feature that only can come together because it's a specific feature with a strike team, because we haven't developed it before, we haven't done it before, so we need to kind of come together and then develop this feature for the game, and then when the feature is established, we can just disband and go to each other's team. Now, this is some of the lingo that we use in games development. There's much more from that came from, but in most studios this is true. However, as you go through different studios, you realize that even within a studio, there's specific lingo that they use in order to describe something, in order to solve something. And each studio is its own kind of like environment, so you have to learn exactly what certain things mean. And I find that fascinating as I go from studio to studio, because like what one studio calls this is another studio calls something else, but it's the same thing. Now, if you think I missed any, or you think that perhaps you actually have questions about some of the ones that I mentioned, drop a comment down below and let me know what are your thoughts. And maybe this can be a series, this can be something that we actually continue, because there's so many more terms and jargon that we use in games because we've been around for quite a while. So if you actually want that to happen, also drop a comment down below, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Until the next one, stay well, stay safe, peace. If you enjoyed the video or found it helpful, go ahead and hit the like button. If you super enjoyed it, leave a super thanks. It's like leaving a little tip, and it directly supports the channel. If you haven't already, subscribe and turn on post notifications so you can continue to see my videos and get your weekly dose of better.